there are different ways that researchers assess personality in young adulthood. Let's start off by discussing creating scenarios and life stories. Young adults create a lifespan construct that represents a unified sense of the past, present, and future. There are many factors that influence a lifespan construct, things like identity, values, society. So you can see how this is still strongly tied to identity. A lifespan construct is manifested in two ways: through a scenario, which consists of expectations about the future, taking aspects of a person's identity that are particularly important now and projecting them into a plan for the future. So the scenario maps out the future based on a social clock. And so that's the second way that the lifespan construct is manifested. The social clock involves tagging future events with a particular time or age by which they need to be completed. So an example of a social clock might be, well, I want to be married by 30, I want to have my first child by 35, things like that. In all societies, an important cultural and generational influence on adult development is the social clock, or these age-graded expectations for major life events. These would be things like getting a first job, getting married, birth of a child, retiring. We can see that there's some intergenerational tensions that occur when parents expect their young adult children to attain adult milestones on an outdated schedule. So young adults might also feel distressed because their own timing of major milestones is not widely shared by their contemporaries or supported by current public policies. Another way that we can assess personality is by looking at possible selves. So the idea here is that people create possible selves by projecting themselves into the future and thinking about what they would like to become, what they could become, maybe what they're afraid of becoming. So researchers actually asked people to describe their hoped for and feared for possible selves, and then they grouped responses into several categories. So categories here included family, personal, material, relationships, and occupation. The researchers found that there were age differences in these projections depending upon the dimension examined. So in terms of hoped for selves, young adults listed family concerns, like marrying the right person, as most important. Adults in their 30s actually listed family concerns last. Their main issues involved personal concerns, like being a more loving and caring person. By 40 to 59, family issues again became common, like being a parent who can let go of their children. And occupation also became important here. Individuals who were over age 60, we saw that personal is important, like being active and healthy for another decade. So adolescents and young adults are far more likely to have multiple selves and believe more strongly that they can actually become the hoped for self and successfully avoid the feared for self than older adults. So for older adults, it actually seemed that the health domain was the most sensitive and central in the context of aging. So health was the predominated hoped for self, being a healthy person, and feared for self, not being a healthy person. So let's move on and talk about personal control beliefs. Personal control beliefs reflect the degree to which you believe your performance in a situation depends on something you do. So a high sense of personal control implies a belief that performance is up to you, whereas a low sense of personal control implies that your performance is under the influence of forces other than your own. So if we again think back to Carol Dweck's research on a fixed versus a growth mindset, someone with a high sense of personal control is going to probably reflect more of a growth mindset, whereas someone with a low sense of personal control would reflect that they would have more of a fixed mindset. So we see that the results of research on the development of personal control beliefs are actually kind of inconsistent, and that control beliefs vary depending on the domain. So you might have a high sense of personal control when it comes to your intelligence, or a low sense of personal control when it comes to your health, for example. So when it comes to control, research distinguishes two types of control: primary versus secondary control. Now, primary control is behavior aimed at affecting the individual's external world. So an example of primary control might be that you have a test coming up, and so you affect your external world by asking a teacher for tutoring for the test. Secondary control is behavior or cognition aimed at affecting the individual's internal world. So here, you're modifying your own cognitions, your own goals, your own behavioral standards. So here, basically, if you failed a test, you might attribute that failure to the test being very difficult rather than your own ability. So you're kind of emotionally regulating in a way. So primary and secondary control operate in parallel during the first half of life. We see that primary control begins to decline in midlife then, and then secondary control is going to take over. So just think about how we can affect our environment. In what situations would you want to try to affect your external world? So engage in that primary control, versus in what situations would you want to just kind of change how you think about something? So engage in that secondary control. Can you think of some other examples here? Again, your ability to influence the environment is heavily influenced by biological factors, so it's going to change over time. And we're going to see that primary control, that's why we'll see these declines in midlife.